Morgan. Friday again.
Happy
Who'd have thunk?
Friday. I know. Welcome, everyone. Happy Friday. It's early July. It's hot out.
Gonna give us altitude and cruising
So
speeds
I was
too, or
about to say. We're currently on cruise control on this airplane. Please stay seated until I don't know. We should have a little seatbelt sign icon for people. Welcome, everyone. If you're here, drop a hi in chat. We want to see you. Say hello. Uh,
question of
Nick,
the day.
do you have a question of the day?
No, it's your turn.
What? I'm not prepared for this.
I thought you were prepared for every live show, Morgan.
Oh, I wish that were true. Is that the dirty secret?
Okay. Let's think. What is, if you could only do one activity this summer, what would you do? In Calgary, if it ever stops raining, I will do that. We had our tornado yesterday. We had some hail. Like, summer's in full flow, I guess.
Honestly, Cynthia dropped a question of the day
Oh,
in
that's a
honor
good
of
one.
Joey Chestnut, the champion, as the internet would say, the champion of glizzies. uh, what would be your competitive eating food choice? My. Um, I, that's a great question. Maybe we'll answer both of these, Nick.
Sure. What's your food?
What is my food? My food. I'm thinking of something that's like not super carb because there's always like pasta eating contests, and that just sounds horrible. Hot dog. Oh, brownies. I would be a competitive brownie eater. It's just.
You're like, I don't want to have something that's carb heavy, like pasta, but I'm gonna go with brownies.
It's different, right? Like
Well,
it's.
if
I
we're
don't
gonna go
know.
on that road, I know exactly what I would pick then.
Oh, what would you pick?
Chocolate chip cookie.
Are we just talking about our favorite desserts
No,
now?
so
But like.
so the listeners that don't know, I used to be a lot heavier, although I may have gained some back thanks to COVID. But I used to bake all the time. And so I used to go and bake like 4 sheets of cookies. And for somehow 3 would magically go missing by the time that they were, came out of the oven and cooled off to when I put them in the container.
Oh,
So I feel like
yep.
I could do the cookies proud.
Yep. I mean, in terms of summer activity, I think it would be just camping. I mean, I'm in Colorado, so we have so much beautiful outdoors here, and I go every year anyway. So it's not like I don't know, just to clarify, not like a reserved campsite in a campground with facilities, like deep in the woods, distributed BLM land in the States, and it's a great
Off the grid.
experience. Off the grid, 100% off the grid.
Hmm.
How about you, Nick?
I like camping because you can go hiking and exploring. So that's like a full meal deal. The only other one is if I really wanted to spend money on gas,
Hmm.
is that I would go boating. And, when you have the right people,
Yeah,
that can be a blast. But
totally.
camping with the price of gas right now just sounds better. And like just escaping the craziness for a little bit, I'm game.
Mm-hmm. I see some great answers in chat. Twinkies, mangoes, whoopie pies, Tim Hortons donuts. um, so today, Nick, we are talking about elevator pitches on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
I have received many of these this week. I have received some that are okay, and I have received many that are not great at all. So, and this is true every week. I think we both get plenty of in-mails and connect-in pitches and other sorts of sequences that raise our eyebrows. So we thought it might be a good time to spend a power hour talking about elevator pitches. And if it's your first time here, welcome. We do these every Friday. But if it's your first time here, you got to know it's your hour as much as ours. So if you got questions, comments, whatever, throw them in chat. We want to hear from you. We'll answer them, or we'll do our best to try and get to them as we go through our content for today. So,
And
Nick.
if there's something that you love that you really want to share with someone, comment and tag them in, it actually pulls the timestamp so they know exactly where to go.
Mhm.
And with your team, makes it super helpful. But I think the first place we have to start off with is the worst pitch that is the most useless waste of time that you can possibly have. And I'm sure I've done this, and most of
Mm.
you can say you did this too, because it's unfortunately what we get taught to do, and it makes us look like an idiot. So let's just stop doing this forever. And that is, hey, Morgan, I'm amazing. You really don't realize how amazing I am and how amazing we've been over the past 20 years. Book a free meeting to go and find out just how amazing we are. Sincerely, Nick.
Oh gosh.
And my thing is, so what?
Mhm.
I don't have that problem. I don't care about you. I don't care about your company. Every single buyer that I talk to, especially C suite and VPs, they all say the same thing. So what?
So what?
The sooner we can stop doing this and switch it to make it all about who we're talking to is when you earn the right to pitch. So I think one of the things that we need to start out with before we even get into anything else is vampire sales. What do you think, Morgan?
I think so, because we both get pitched, and just to, I know we're being not facetious, but the whole "I'm amazing" pitch is true. I got one the other day that said, "We're a vendor that helps businesses like yours." I don't even know if it said like yours, helps businesses, uh, get more data analytics for their platform, and blah 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 blah. Me. And the first fundamental to counter that is from folklore tradition. Would you like to explain vampire sales, or should I?
I don't mind. It was so this vampire sales started as a challenge for myself because what I realized is that when people ask you for a meeting, it's a sign that they've mentally made a change, that they're committed to a change, or that at least they're very, very curious. And so I was like, okay, so how could I get them to ask me for a meeting? Or to ask the big question that we're going to answer today is, so Morgan, what do you do?
Mm,
But the
hmm
way to do that is to embrace the vampire. By folklore, vampires were not allowed to enter your home unless they were invited. So one of the best ways to go and use a pitch is to get asked to pitch. And it's actually not that hard. It's about asking the right questions and doing your research. So, we've all done this. We've all jumped in the comments and hit someone with a pitch, or we did the connect and pitch, or we jumped in mails and we sent the vague pitch that Morgan just talked about. But Morgan, what are some of those cues that you get that it is actually time to pitch? Like, what are you listening for in a conversation? So, of course, there's times where you'll start with a pitch on LinkedIn,
hmm
but what are you listening for when somebody's talking other than, so what do you do, that you know it's time to pitch?
So there's this interesting dynamic. If you're if you're having a conversation, if I'm having a conversation, oftentimes it's a back and forth of different questions, right? Now, if it's done well, one of those questions is the first question is not going to be what do you do? So, my job is to ask increasingly interesting and insightful questions. And what I mean by that is I'm trying to learn more about them. You could sort of think of this as like building context. So, you have a guess that the person you're talking to is the right person to talk to, but you don't know for sure. So, what you want to do is to craft, or what I try and do is to craft questions that start pretty low stakes. um, did you see this article? I saw your company was recently hired, some observation insight plays, and we can get into the tactics of this. But generally, increasingly interesting and insightful questions. What happens is there's a shift, and it's tonal. It's something that you have to listen to. And over DMs, it's something you're looking for in how they're phrasing things, where you suddenly become desirable. And not in sort of like a romantic sense. I want to be very clear here. Because that's like 100% not okay on LinkedIn for all the people who do that. Like, that's just obnoxious and not okay. I mean desirable, like they want to talk to you. And this is what you're listening for, what you're reading for is a shift in the way they're talking or asking questions back. Because now suddenly it's not just you're a vendor who's coming to them to learn more. There's this shift in which it becomes,
Tell me
how do you
more.
know that? Tell me
Mm,
more. That's super interesting. I didn't know you could do that. Just the other day, I was actually chatting with somebody, and he had reached
really?
out and had talked about like increasing connection rates. And so he had said, "Have you ever experimented with this?" On and on. And we had some back and forth. And I said, "Well, honestly, right now, both Nick and I get somewhere between 90 and 100% connect rates on blank second degree connection requests just to send out to somebody in the industry. 90% plus of the time, they'll accept it, whether or not they're an attendee of our show." Shift. Really? How do you do that? Tell me more. What's that like? How did you get that there? And so suddenly, it's not about the product. It's not about it's not at all. It's just like, here's this fact, here's an insight. We'll talk about this. But it shifts. What you're listening for is this shift in desirability.
Back in the day, when we used to meet in person, what this would look like a lot of the time is you guys would be having a conversation back and forth, and all of a sudden they would shift positions where you actually step into the expert seat,
Hmm.
and they get really curious. It's almost like going back to high school and you have a secret, and they gotta know the secret because you like, hey, did you hear? Oh, it's okay, never mind. And they just need to know. There's like a craving to get that information. But this is what we got to do: is we got to go and come in with something that once they know, they can't unknow. And that's what top sellers do: is they have this pattern recognition that they've done this so many times, is they start to realize that there's certain buttons, and we've all heard this in typical sales books and everything else. There's only like 2, maybe 3 reasons why people buy you, like what they actually get or what they're trying to solve. And when you think about that in a fun way, in a creative way, and present it to them, they have to stop and think. But it's like that secret. Once they've stopped and thought about it, what they're thinking about is how it applies to them. They've answered the so what themselves, and they're going, tell me more.
Tell me more.
And
And the
that's when
vampire.
it's when the whole conversation switches.
Mhm.
And so this can come from what actually Morgan does this really amazing thing coming from a marketing background is he triangulates
Me, a
competition.
marketer? What?
Shh, I don't want to say it too loud. But
Sorry.
he triangulates the competition. And I think this is why so many sales fall flat too is, hey, Morgan, we strategically partner with our customers and we actually listen to them. And, we have amazing products that make them more money and save money. And it's like, cool. So if you didn't have those, what would you be? Sounds like unemployed and have no business.
Right.
Table stakes. But what
Hmm.
Morgan does is really interesting. And it really helped our LinkedIn outreach is taking his marketing perspective as the
Hmm.
base and then applying it to what I learned in sales, and it
Hmm.
made this really nice hybrid that's really hard to ignore. Yeah, Morgan, did you want to dive into
Hmm.
your triangulation of the
Sure.
competition?
Sure. So it's not all that complicated, and anybody can do this. So step one, and I just want to pause for a moment. Everybody's like, aren't we talking about elevator pitches? This is all about your elevator pitch. This is the foundational work to do it right. And if you haven't done this prep work or this foundational work, all you're going to do is test little minimal differences on your outreach that aren't going to transform the way people respond to you. But if you do the foundational work first, you have a much deeper sense of who you're going after, why you're going after them, what you're trying to gain attention on. So, step one is, who's your competition? If you don't have a sense of who your competition is in your space, and step two, why are you different than them? It's going to be very hard to create a compelling sequence and a compelling insight, a compelling series of questions that shifts the desirability. Because if you just come to them and say, we sell analytics software, well, like, there's
Cool.
10,000 vendors that sell analytics software. Okay, who cares? Now, if you get more narrow and you're targeting a specific persona, and you know in your industry there's 3 different competitors, right? There's you plus 3 others. Well, competitor 1 and 2 are pretty similar. Competitor 3 has this unique thing, but you stand out because of AI. I don't know. Okay. AI is always something that a lot of people are talking about now. And maybe that's unique in your industry or a specific AI tool. All right. So now you understand your competition and now you think about what makes me different. Then all you're trying to do is you're trying to triangulate the piece of the market that is going to directly benefit from this, that can't get that same benefit from your competitors because of your unique value as well as your advantage. And then all you're going to work on is driving something, as Nick said, that once they know, they can't unknow and link it to what makes you different. So, for example, if you sell an AI tool, one insight, you're looking for something unique, something to, and for our audio listeners in the future, they're going to be like, what is he doing? You literally want people to go, oh, okay. Like, you want what? What is that? I didn't know that before. Okay. In marketing speak, that's called raising eyebrows. You want people to pay attention to you, be like, wow, that's different. So this is maybe something developed from your marketing team, maybe not. As a seller, I believe you
Usually
can
not.
do this. Okay. Usually not. So, as a seller, it might be on you to articulate this and to test it on your outreach. And what it sounds like is, and this is one piece of the elevator pitch, what it sounds like is we work with other enablement professionals and they always struggle with finding the right document at the right time for their sales team. And we know that that leads to lost revenue upwards of $100 million a year. That's a pain point and a problem. Okay. The link is the only way, okay, this is kind of marketing speak, that teams can solve this effectively at scale, speaking to what your persona wants, is to use AI. Because otherwise it's all manual and time intensive work. So this is like I'm sort of just riffing live. This could be workshopped and wordsmithed all the way down. But basically you're trying to articulate something that links the pain that they experience to the something unique about you. And it's something worth testing, not just writing on a whiteboard and saying we're done with. And we'll return to that theme again and again today. So I don't want to go too deep on this, Nick, but basically it's how are you different from your competitor? What makes you unique? And tying that uniqueness to something they can only get from you related to their pain.
Since most of you guys are in the tech space, go to G2,
Mm-hmm.
look at what customers are saying. Don't look at marketing speak, don't look at any of the other crap. Look at what customers are actually seeing and experiencing, and then use that to go and build out your competitive advantage. Look at where you stand out. What are the things that they mention that nobody else mentions? And try to find that. And then once you have that, now it's really easy to have that conversation because a lot of sales is actually about disqualification, where a lot of the time we're trying to make people fit. And that's why we have really long, taken it like drawn out sales cycles, is because we're trying to justify showing up. But if we
Mm-hmm.
disqualify early, like actually, that they would probably be better off with my competitor, you could actually spot that before you reach out.
So one thing that shows up as Nick was saying this, and the thing that I had to learn in selling that I didn't learn as a previous marketer is, and I mean this respectfully, people don't care. Okay, marketers think they're special and they're going to do marketing that thinks the world cares about them. Okay, that's the marketer's job. As a seller, I believe it is on you as a part of your outreach to help people to care about what you have to offer. Okay, because most of your sellers are inundated right now with messaging, with all sorts of templates, blank nonsense that's just procured with all sorts of buzzwords and all the rest of it. And it lands in their inbox. And as you go up the power line, they're going to get 12, 15, 20, 30, 40 of these messages a day. So You have to articulate why they care or why they should care compared to everyone else in your market. Because if you don't, you're going to sound like everyone else in your market.
Somebody explained this to me in the best way, then it's always stuck with me is if you feel healthy and you go to the doctor and they tell you have this bad condition, but you don't feel like there's anything wrong, are you gonna? They're a professional, but are you blankly just gonna accept it?
Mm-hmm.
No, there's got to be a justification. But we have to give it in just small enough pieces that they're interested.
Can I provide a quick example? Because I think people work well with examples. So,
Absolutely.
um, I want to read to you a generic example of this idea and then a specific example of this idea. So, a generic example, and we're sort of dancing around this, Nick. So maybe I'm going to jump right into like the what you do question. So let's just
Mm,
think about two alternatives here. So one alternative is the generic, when you don't identify who you're serving, why they should care, your unique value, etc. And then the other is more specific. So the generic, just from a marketing perspective, there's an agency that has a headline that says, "We are a branding and marketing agency offering thoughtful strategy, focused creativity, and custom built implementation." What do you
mhm.
do? Well, we do strategy and creativity and implementation. Okay, right?
Does
You can
anybody not?
hear how generic that language is. And what's important is, as the sellers, we get all wrapped up and we know how special we are. We know what makes us different. So we need to make sure that that hits the page. Okay. Um, there's something more specific. Here's an alternative. Uh, Master your personal brand through lean, effective content creation.
Whew. Crispy.
Lot more succinct, right? So these are marketing examples, but these are compare and contrast. Option one, very generic. It says, we'll do whatever we want, but also there's no reason, there's no understanding about why you're different compared to any other company I'm working with. Option two, very specific, right? It's okay, it's somebody looking for personal brand and what they do is content creation. So it's very particular. And that means it's disqualifying a big part of the market because there's a lot of buyers who may not need those things. So take a look at your messaging. Look at the email sequences that you're using or the DMs that you're sending or how you're responding to what you do. What's the classic exercise here, Nick? It's like if you removed the logo and you
Oh,
swapped in your competitor's logo, would it basically be the same thing? And if
most
that's
companies.
true,
Yes.
then it's just some time to work on and on shaping it and working it a little bit down. And we'll talk about tactically that in a sec.
It's so critical. Like we've worked with so many reps to go and work on their LinkedIn outreach.
Hmm.
But without understanding this, it makes it impossible to have a good conversation past that or to get outside of the script and actually use a framework that allows you to show how brilliant you are. Because without that industry knowledge, without that understanding of why your company exists and what they actually do better than anyone else, really puts you in a bad spot to do commodity sales.
Hmm.
Once you understand this, it becomes fun. One of the hardest things I ever did to try to get better at this, I think it's always a work in progress because the market's always changing and evolving, and so is your company. Ask them about their product roadmap, but go have a coffee with a friend and try to ask questions to get them to ask you, so what have you been up to? What have you been up to is another opportunity to pitch.
Hmm.
But the key that changes in a social environment is that it needs to be short and it needs to invite more conversation. The one and done emails, the one email to write that's going to go and end it all, and they're just going to magically like if that one email was so magic, you wouldn't have book a meeting. It would be by now.
Hmm.
So we got to go and actually think about it as a conversation. So like Morgan asked me, like, so what have you been up to?
Hmm.
And it's my job to make it fun. Hey Morgan, we were actually looking at why social fails. And we thought, hey, why not be the Thomas Edison of social selling and be that mad scientist that finds those 10,000 ways that don't work? So we can actually go and tell you what does. And Morgan might say, well, how do you do that?
Mm-hmm.
But see, it's inviting conversation. The whole point of a great pitch is it invites conversation. And the tighter you go and dial it in, the more it sticks because they can't unknow it.
And that's the difference between like, what do you do? What have you been up to? Well, we've built this AI toolbox for SaaS companies to better analyze their data.
Actually,
Okay.
Morgan.
Yeah.
So this is one of the few times I'm going to ask this in a live show.
Oh boy. Okay.
But I'm going to change the angle of it.
Okay.
So me and the audience here today in the comments, we're sitting down having coffee, or we're having we're just chatting through DMs on LinkedIn.
Mm-hmm.
In the comments, respond with, so what have you been up to?
Mm-hmm.
So in the comments, right, how would you respond to that? And we'll walk through a couple good ones with you, and we'll explain why they're great conversation starters.
Mm-hmm.
You can take multiple tries. Try a few times, 2-3 times, and let's talk about this, because the best way to learn sales is to see more examples.
Yep.
Honestly, the best thing I ever did was fail.
Yeah.
And fail fast.
Mm-hmm.
Because it takes about 20 hours to build up that pattern recognition. 20 hours of dedicated work. 20 hours of writing pitches is tough. But if we go and do this as a team and we go and write these things down, we can talk about the cues. So like one of the cues that works really well is, so what have you been up to? But then you have to think, how do I get here? So while you guys are writing this, think about that. Like, how could you get your friend to ask that?
Mm-hmm.
How could you get somebody on LinkedIn, some random stranger, to ask you, so what do you do?
Mm-hmm. So continue to drop them into chat, and we'll workshop this live with everyone here. We'll pull up some options and give some insights. Because, as Nick's pointed out, your elevator pitch, we think the reason people say yes or no is because of our pitch. And that's maybe 50% true. The other chunk is how we're leading up to that pitch. Because the difference between a conversation with a friend or a conversation with a trusted expert is that there's a lead up, there's trust in advance that brings you into a conversation. And it invites curiosity. It builds rapport. It has people relax their guard, right? If you're sitting down with a friend over beer, and even if your friend has something to sell you, then it's better. It's a better environment than if your friend just pitch slapped you out of the blue. And that dance is an art form to itself to lead up to those, as we were talking about at the beginning. And I see a couple flowing into chat. So shall we pull up Terrence's? So what have you been up to?
Learning how to create engaging emails so the other person responds. Well, that's interesting. How do you do that?
Mm-hmm. I think it's I wonder if there's a way to like tell even a little more story on that. Like learning is a passive verb. Yep, go ahead.
So like this one.
What have you been up to?
You know how companies lose millions of hours a year doing manual stuff? Well, automate all that stuff so it's done on its own. So it kind of touched on the problem, but like if we went a little bit higher up, you know, the way we work since COVID has really changed. And, you know, it's really not acceptable to be doing all that manual stuff. I think about all the time I lose, like, you know, as I'm prospecting, trying to build lists and try to go and do this and try to do that. And we realized that, and then like you can go, but you're trying to make it conversational where you're kind of getting a little bit higher up of like, where was that? I had one that was really interesting. It was like, the way we do X has changed. Think about example. The way we do it has moved from evidence of undeniable change in the world.
Mm-hmm.
It was one I really liked. Somebody had pointed it out to me, and I'm like, that's an interesting conversation starter because it's hard to ignore. But the shorter it is, the better it works.
Right. Like one actually interesting thing on that one, you could, to make it more conversational, you could even invite a one sentence story. I spent 30 hours building a sales nav list for outreach. I don't know if that's true or not, but right. And I realized it just sucked. So we worked on we realized that companies struggle with all this manual work. And I would write it exactly like it's being said. And then jump into well, we help automate all this so that, all the sort of further. Like even that one sentence story to add color can help make it more conversational and can help reduce people's guard when it comes to the pitch. Because if it's too succinct and it's just problem solution, people are like, he's whatever.
I got one.
Okay.
It was for my post earlier today. So I had some time to do some reflection over the past couple weeks, and I was trying to think of, why did I have such a call reluctance in the past?
Hmm.
And what I realized is that the way that most people build lists doesn't actually give you a legitimate reason to call. So then you're stuck there with the phone in your hand going, so what do I say? Why them? And of course, I'm there on the other side going, so what? So that's kind of the premise. Now think of where you could take that conversation, because now I'm storytelling. Now you're inviting them into the story, and they're like, yeah, I felt, because you're talking about a workflow. You're talking about a job to be done, and you're connecting it to an emotion.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of those starting pieces isn't logical, it's emotional. And so when we talk about this with companies, I talk about what pisses you off in your job. But
Yeah,
honestly,
it's true.
it can't be just like it's annoying. What actually makes you really mad? What makes you really happy? You have to go extremes because they won't be ignored. Something in the middle is easy to ignore. One thing that Ian Cognac talks about is problems with pain.
Mm-hmm.
The more frequent the pain, the easier it is to go and talk about, because, as like Evan said earlier this week, people love to complain.
They do.
So you hit that and you're like, wow, like you know me so well. It's hard to ignore.
Let's pull up Patrick's. There's some good sort of conversational. So what have you been up to?
Most employees are forced to waste countless hours scrambling through thousands of PDFs, emails, Excel spreadsheets to find the relevant information they need to perform daily tasks. So I create one single repository that allows employees to ask instead. Gotta go
Oh,
plug
to
in
ask
so I can.
instead of search. So they ask a question and get an immediate answer.
Hey, Morgan,
Yeah.
when you're creating your marketing documentation and give it a stupid title, do you
Yep.
ever have a hard time finding it and get stuck there like, man, I just need to post this, but I cannot for the life of me find it?
It's the worst.
What if there was a repository or some type of search that made it always there and ready? Do you think that would be helpful for you?
So, and let's just break this down because it's helpful to hear what's going on and what Nick is doing. Is we're making it casual and we're reducing the amount of formal language used. If you couldn't say it to somebody in a casual way, don't write it on LinkedIn. Simple as that. So, one of the ways, on top of Nick's approach, the thing that if I was just to take this and then rework it casually, so somewhere in between Nick's just total different approach and then just like casual language, I would say, so I would just totally scrap PDFs, emails, and Excel spreadsheets because it doesn't matter. Perform daily tasks is a very formal way to say doing shit, uh, or just the things they have to do every day. Uh, and instead, something along the lines of like, you know how, and this is how I'd write it, like, you know how you lose the document you always need to find because it's not named right, but you need it today to make that, depending upon your audience, sales call or that email. Yeah, we worked on a database that, or a repository, or however I'd articulate that, so that you can search instead of having your team ask you all the time. And if you're targeting managers, you can even make this more pointed, which is like, you know how your employees always ask you for that document and it's always misnamed or you can't find it, and I just continue to go in. Those are some riffs to think about it,
Yes.
because that highlights that pain for them, and they're like, "What? You helped solve that?"
So then having to go and message Morgan and ask him what he titled it so I can find it. It's
Not that
right
I'm
there.
guilty of that, right? Yeah.
We've all done that too. I want to bring up, we'll go into a couple more, but I want to bring up Chris's point.
Yeah.
Complainers are a salesperson's dream. Complainers are inviting conversation. You have the choice to either make it positive or a negative experience. So think about how you could go and jump in that conversation to join in, but without bringing it down. Just something to consider. But it is true. People love
Yep.
to post on social media. Like, look at Facebook. How many people would complain about politics or whatever else? They're complaining about something in their job, job, like their things to be done, their workflow. Something is bugging them. They might
Mhm.
start out with, I'm really sick and tired of not being recognized and getting that promotion I want. Okay, well, what would be on their manager's mind that would not allow them to get the recognition they deserve? What are they actually
Mhm.
looking for that they don't see? What is hidden in between the lines? Let's go and do this one. I love
This is
when you
great.
get a longer one to go and break down.
All right. What have you been up to?
One thing I came across working with most of the product owners like you is the challenge to release the software updates faster and efficient. Tested on thousands of real devices. They have lost revenue, customers. Do you say you have the solid infrastructure with you? Hey, Morgan,
Yeah.
I came across the most fascinating thing with product owners.
Hmm. What's that?
You know when you're sitting there and you want to test it and make sure it's perfect, and you're like, "Oh, I'll just push it tomorrow, or I'll just push it later, or you're always putting off that little bit because you want it to be just perfect." What we realize is that insight of just a little bit more, just one more thing, actually costs your company millions a year. But now it's like, oh,
Oh.
but what everybody misses when they're pitching is you're pitching a problem.
Mhm.
You're stepping into their shoes and experiencing the problem with them. You're not pitching a solution, you're pitching a problem.
Mhm.
When you go through change management, what people do is they go, why change? Why now? Why you? Somebody might argue the last two will switch, but like, you got to first answer why change. And what you're doing is you're pitching them something they can't ignore. They're like, oh, maybe the way I'm doing things isn't perfect, isn't good enough. Because that's what we lose the most deals to, right? It's
Yep.
good enough.
Another way to approach this, just on a riff, is like, what have you been up to? I was talking with this product owner the other day, and gorgeous product, super functional, super fast. Problem was, when it hit the real world, it looked great on 3 of the thousands of devices that users actually use. So we figured out a way to test those products on real devices before the product goes live, and then jump in a little bit further. So that's another way to tackle that, because I have this sense of the tested on thousands of real devices comes to like a unique value prop or something unique about this. So it'd be really good to highlight that if a pain of the product owner is product looks great, but it gets into the real world and it just breaks every once in a while when it hits the real device, right?
Looked great on Apple on my desktop, looked great on my
Yeah.
Apple phone, looked great on a desktop, PC desktop, but I didn't have an Android phone to test it, and I looked at it and it was garbage. And I was
It
like,
was
oh crap.
yeah, and you can tell that. Make it conversational, because, and I will say, I think. Can I just actually highlight one thing out of this? And this is just very simple: is that most of the product owners like you is a very formal way of trying to build rapport. And I would try and make it informal, right? And just talk about what's going on in the industry and use casual language instead of something a little more formalized that you might see.
Yeah. Honestly, it sounds like such a stupid little piece of advice. One of
Mm.
the biggest things I changed, and I joked about this for years, and when I was training my reps, is I called it bro talk.
Okay.
Like, how would you talk to your friend? You don't go,
Mm-hmm.
"Hey Morgan, I was talking to, sellers of the utmost capacity with the most strategic selling capabilities, and in that they're going to go at you like, "Are you special or what's wrong with you?"
Yeah.
But it's like, "Man, like I just stumbled on the greatest thing that ever existed and it blew my mind and I have to share it with someone."
Mm-hmm.
That is the mentality you need to have. Morgan, have you realized that it is actually freaking impossible to go and get an exec, like to answer an email, cold call, or something, like just actually talk to them nowadays?
Yes.
Right? Well, we were looking, it's like, so where are they? How do you actually get a conversation with them and what does work?
Mm-hmm.
Well, we realized that they're on social, but I think it's going to surprise you where they're responding.
Really? Where are they responding? And I just
Well,
leaned in and I was
yeah,
like, what? Tell me more.
but what one of the best things you guys can do is pick a buddy.
Mm.
Pick a buddy and do this back and forth. Run it like you're running a drill in sports. Over and over and over. The minimum back and forth is 3 times. But it's not you pitch, then they pitch. You run the same pitch over and over. And what you're doing is you're watching for, what are the cues that I should be pitching? What is my goal about pitching now? What should I prioritize in my pitch? What should I defer in my pitch? What taught me that? This is the mental mind game that we play in sales. And this is why great sellers are so much better than amateur sellers, is because they mastered this mental chess.
Can,
What is the course of action? Why
mm,
am I doing, why did I pick this one over the other ones? But this is where you got to really dial in and focus. And if you do it with a partner, they're like, okay, you could do this better, but this was awesome. Let's do it again.
mm-hmm,
And that is how you get better really fast, because you're getting immediate feedback. I
mm-hmm.
will say, running this with lots of sales teams, 4 is the best number. Anything more than 4 is too much. Too much information to actually run with and apply and go. So, and it also you can't run as many drills.
Mm-hmm.
Groups of 4, have people of varying skill level, and just go. It's
Mm-hmm.
fun.
Can we put up Cynthia's comment at 10:39, not the most recent one? So this is interesting. We've talked about this previously, and I think we actually talked about this last week a little bit, which is look in the comments, look for the pains, research what your prospect is liking on LinkedIn. Using their statements for a pain pitch shows you're interested in helping, not just selling. Couldn't agree more. And there's a little evolution on this, which is something Nick is super talented at. And you hear this in a lot of his riffs on these pitches, which you're trying to match their internal narrative. So, what you heard on what Nick was just doing is he's like, you know, when, and also, gosh, I hate it when my team just comes to me, or when I was a sales manager, I always had my team coming to me asking for all sorts of stuff. You know what those sales managers you're selling to are thinking? Oh my God, my team is coming to me for all kinds of stuff. So you're trying to match that internal narrative. And one of the ways to do that is to do what Cynthia was talking about. And that's just to engage on social and see what people are talking about. Complainers are a salesperson's best friend, as Chris was saying. And listening in to how people are articulating their problems, because it's not just good enough. It's not a good enough pitch to just say, here's my solution, which is where that's the mistake we make,
It's not
right?
even just, here's my solution.
It's
Here's why I'm amazing.
here's
Like,
why
it
I'm
jumps to
amazing.
like me.
Yeah.
This is why you need to buy me. And you're like, well, I didn't know I needed a solution to a
Hmm.
problem that I didn't know I had.
Yep.
This is why we always start with the foundation. And as Morgan said, One of my favorite things to do when I would go in, when I target big accounts, I spend time building a hypothesis. Morgan laughs at me because I'll spend a half an hour
But it's so
just
worth it.
sitting there designing this thought process of, okay, so if I want to reach out to this director, what is their greatest fear to come out of their superior's mouth? What is that conversation? Hey, I just looked at the reports and this is what I saw. What did they see? Hey, if you don't go and get this up to snuff, we're going to have to let you go. What is that? What are they being judged on? The easiest, and I not many people do this, is job descriptions. And a lot of those job descriptions are in the company's blog. Like if you just Google search their title, a lot of those job descriptions are still there. Or if you scroll down, a lot of people still use their LinkedIn like an old school resume spot. So they'll actually put their key objectives, their job description, their key things they're responsible for, or what they're judged on in there. So this allows us to have that insight of what are the conversations they're having in their day to day. And it kind of goes to that FOMO of like, what is their greatest fear that's going to come out of their boss's mouth?
Yes. And matching that narrative. So here's the thing. Here's the real secret. Great marketers do this all of the time in copywriting. The problem in B2B is that there's not a lot of great marketing. So we lose touch with the fact like we need to match these not that I just dropped a bomb on the whole industry, but that we need to match people's internal narratives, because here's the thing. And let's return to this really quick, and then we should throw up another one to work on. The person you're trying to reach literally gets dozens of these messages every week
Or
day, depending upon their power level, right? These VPs and CEOs are just inundated with this all of the time. So it's not even just what differentiates you from your competition in terms of like your product offer, et cetera. It's also how you're doing your outreach. Because if you're doing your outreach differently than the way your competitors are doing your outreach, you can stand out in their DMs or in their comments or in their email or whatever it might be. And that comes back to matching their internal narrative, where somebody says, and we've had this a couple of times. Nick is particularly good at this, which is like, how did you know that?
I
That's the
love when I
goal.
get that back.
That's
It's
the
like,
goal. Yes.
winning.
But how did you know that? And then Nick is like, well, we work with people in your industry all the time. This is how we know that. Or I was reading your financial reports and put the pieces together, and I have this experience and all the rest of it. But it's a conversation suddenly prompted by this idea of what are they thinking? What are they really thinking? What's going on in their head? And then
and
just stating it out loud.
and execs, like if you're targeting C-suite and you're like, hey, I saw you were talking, I was listening to this podcast episode and you went down this, and it really surprised me.
Mhm.
You didn't get to go into too much detail after that. I was wondering if we could go and discuss it some more.
Yep.
But why would you bring that up? Because it leads to your solution. It leads to a problem that they might be having. It walks you into that through conversation. Because isn't that what they always teach us in sales? Is we are defined by the quality of the questions that we ask. So it's like playing chess. Where are you going?
Mhm.
Why there?
Do you want to pull up the how we tend? What have you been up to?
You know how we tend to write emails for any request we make? There's typically a checklist involved as well. Translations, they're no different. What if you could have a specific checklist for a translation at your fingertips and you just have to tick
A
a
box.
boxes?
Mhm.
That's good.
I would test that out.
I would respond to that.
Yeah, I would test that out. I'd be like, what do you mean? Tell me more.
Mm-hmm.
But do you see the difference to the quality of that to what most of us get in our LinkedIn DMs? Like, just think of that pro con A/B comparison. That is interesting. I'm like, yeah, I do know how we tend to write emails for any request we make.
Do you know what the one thing I love about this too when you dial this in is it's repeatable.
Mhm.
Because a lot of personas, they have the same responsibilities, they have the same workflow, they deal with the same crap. So you can repeat it. And so a lot of the time when I find something that's like, wow, or like it makes them like lean back, then that it's verified in my mind. And so I'll try it a few more times. If I get 10 out of 10 or like 8 out of 10, nothing less than 8, like somewhere between 8 and 9 out of 10, that to me is something I can roll with at a scale.
Yeah.
I can just keep reusing because obviously I hit the nail on the head.
Can we talk a little bit about sequencing this on LinkedIn? Because I think this is important.
Sequencing?
What?
What's that on LinkedIn? Yeah,
No,
go
but
for
I
it.
mean timing this. Like,
I
when do
know what
you
you're
do
saying.
this,
I'm just
Nick?
just just teasing.
Because one of the things I presume people might do is they hear this and they say, okay, I'm going to write this better elevator pitch, and then I'm going to throw it in my connection request. Yeah. So when's the right time, Nick? How do we lead up to this?
So I think the biggest misconception in sales now is people think they're selling a meeting, but really what you're doing is you're selling a conversation. That is why Gong, Lavender, all these players that have great data on what is getting replied isn't on, can I get 15 minutes on your calendar? You
Mhm.
missed a step. And that it's judging or gauging curiosity and interest. Interested? Thoughts? Is this worth diving into? Once you hit on that, it's that floodgate. So the best way to explain this is think of it's like a text message. You know when your like family member has something going on and they're used to writing emails and they send you this freaking novel and you're like, why? This could have been a phone call. You have to write the message for the medium that you're sending it in. And Will Allred had a really great term for this is mental spam filter.
Mm,
When I see something that doesn't fit, that doesn't look like a conversation with my friends, doesn't look like a conversation at all, it's ignored until I have time, if I ever have time. But when it's like short and sweet and like really quick, it passes my spam filter and I respond. Something to consider is if it was a text message to a friend, is it too long? Is it too formal? Is it emotional? Or is it too logical?
yeah.
We're emotional humans. This first bit of this conversation, 90% of the time taps into an emotion first. What bugs them? And like Chris said, you can usually find that in the comments.
Yeah, 100%. And what Nick is pointing to is that this doesn't have to be your first message. Remember, this is what we were talking about at the first part. Your goal in vampire sales is to have a unique enough conversation and an insightful conversation that they lead up to this question of, well, what do you do? Or what are you up to? And this, I will say, is probably the main mistake I see sellers make is they jump the gun.
You know what it's like?
Hmm.
It's like a big blockbuster movie without the trailer.
Oh, totally. Yeah.
You're like, I didn't sign up for this movie. I don't want to watch this. I don't have 2 hours to go and watch this when I don't know if I even like it.
Yeah. Like what if every movie trailer was literally just the title of the movie and the date when it comes out?
So think about this when you guys go and pitch. I never thought about it putting it in this way, but it's like what you're doing is you're giving them the teaser that makes them buy in to watch the whole movie. And the key thing with the movie part, the one thing I've really noticed makes the biggest difference is tell a story. But you're not the hero. This is the part where I've seen it go wrong is that sellers make themselves the hero. But when the seller makes their customer the hero, it's hard to ignore. because you're like, oh yeah, I could see how that would work in my business, because they're stepping into your shoes. And because when we get told a really good story, we go along for the ride, our brain actually interprets it differently. They build a connection to it and they become part of it because we're actually taking them on the journey with us. So think about how that would change your conversations to have this teaser, this conversation starter, earning the right to tell a story in which you're installing all those bits and pieces of why your product or service really is better and how it was felt by your customers that are already using it.
Mm-hmm. I the for me and Nick and I Nick and I get pitched every week. We both do. We get connect pitches, we get emails, we get people who connected with us 3 weeks ago who their first point of contact 3 weeks later is sending us a pitch in our DMs. I don't know why this is all sequenced in that way, but what Nick has just said is we have to remember LinkedIn is a social platform. We're supposed to be social on it, right? We can use it to sell. There's no question about it. There are people in the DMs today who have sold a lot of business off of LinkedIn, um, and who are in our audience and people we interact with sell a ton of stuff on LinkedIn. But the reason that they are successful is not because they lead with the pitch, right? They are leading with curiosity. And if we think about sales, if we think about selling on social or becoming a social seller, as we have this idea, and I'm drawing a box here for our visual, our audience. Okay, so we have this idea, and it's filled with all of our assumptions. All right. And most of us, which is fine, most of us haven't been VPs of sales, but we have to sell to them. Most of us haven't been directors of mergers and acquisitions at financial services companies, but we have to sell to them. Okay. So, what we do in selling is we create assumptions, and it's our little container, it's our box. And out of those assumptions come our messaging and our outreach sequences and our pitches and our sales process, even sometimes. And what's important on social is if you lead with curiosity, you can test those assumptions. And all you're doing is you're asking better questions. You're becoming more insightful. You're asking if this is a real problem for them. You're trying to uncover what's going on. I mean, I need to amend the last statement. I would never directly ask somebody, is this a problem for you? Because that's just super formal and nobody ever responds to that. But I would try and work like a detective to uncover, what are my assumptions correct? Because Nick and I can say with certainty that we have made assumptions about our prospects that turned out to be 100% wrong.
Maybe a time or two.
And like probably many, many times. And that's fine. That's part of sales. We're supposed to go out and test and fail and not do something right? We're supposed to figure out, is this the right person to talk to? Is this the right role? Is this the right time? Do they have the pain? Because if it's the right time and they have the pain and it's the right role, suddenly
Boom.
the conversation shifts from, why are you pitching me, to, holy cow, you really understand my problem. Tell me more.
So there's probably a lot of you guys that are wondering, like, what does this look like on social? So this is how I use this very quickly is I start with a role that I've been in. No more, no less. And so say if I've only ever been an AE or an SDR or a sales manager, I've been in their shoes. I know what they suffer with. So I start with them. And what I do is I have a document open of my pitch, of my value hypothesis, and I'm building it in the background with every conversation. It's like one of those pictures that it gets clearer with every touch point. And then when it's clear enough, when it's good that I can actually go to bat and I'm like, that is something worth fighting for, I have all the information I need, then I go up to the executive, but I have to reframe it in a way that they care about. So this is how I start lower, build my business case, and then excel up. And this is why I don't usually get ignored, because I'm fact checked. And then I just make sure I get permission to go and name drop or whatever, whoever I'm using as my validation, that they basically act as internal champions. And it does not take long. So
Nope.
ask yourself, Who are the 3 to 5 people in this company that need to know we exist? What do they need to know before they'll be ready to buy? Have that as part of your pitch and some of the stuff we talked about today. Look at how you can turn it into a conversation with first, like, how do you open the conversation? How do you get them to lean in? What is the story you're going to tell? Have a couple stories on standby.
Yeah.
And then just have meaningful conversations. And you will book meetings that aren't just meetings, they're good business that's going to close. And that is worth building a career on.
Absolutely. We're at time. Thank you, everyone, for joining this Power Hour this morning. It's been great to have you. So glad we could workshop out some elevator pitches. If you have additional questions, surprise, surprise, we're on LinkedIn. Shoot us a DM. It's a crazy thought, I know, but be social. Connect with us. We'd love to hear from you. And if you want to watch this again, it's recorded at this link or on the B2B Power Hour YouTube. You can replay to your heart's content and workshop through any of the things that we've talked about. So, Nick?
I'm going to change this a little bit, usually for my usual spiel. Sales is a team sport. In order to get better at it, you need to surround yourself with the right people. So think about this next week until you see us next week, or you jump into the podcast. Who are 5 people that you want to have around you that will make you a better seller and get you closer to that title change, to whatever that goal is, the reason why you sell, and you'll do nothing but succeed. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for joining us for this B2B Power. Can't wait to see you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.